All right, hello, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Ann Roberts, the Director of Organization for the Golden Crown Literary Society, and I want to welcome you to the 2020 GCLS Virtual Con, and this is our very first panel, Persistence, Perseverance, Perspiration, How to Finish What You Start. For those of you who are new to the Golden Crown Literary Society, also known as GCLS, GCLS recognizes and rewards quality literary works about women who love women, and we provide learning opportunities, encouragement, and assistance to new and established writers. We have a highly respected writing academy, an annual conference of hundreds of readers, writers, publishers, and editors, and a monthly GCLS members-only online book club. We invite you to learn more about GCLS and perhaps become a member if you're not, by visiting our website, goldencrown.org. The GCLS would like to thank everyone who continues to support us through donations. If you'd like to make a donation, please visit the website and click on Donate. Here are a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. We'll have about 5 to 10 minutes at the end of this session for Q&A. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can. Please be sure to use the Zoom Q&A box to submit a question. This is the section our moderator will be monitoring. If you run into technical issues, please log off and log back in. This usually resolves most issues. That's the end of the announcements. We hope that you enjoy the presentation. I'd like to turn the session over now to the moderator, MJ Lowe.
Hello, welcome everyone. My name is MJ Lowe. I am a librarian with over 20 years of public library experience. I love Reader's Advisory, especially the lavender kind. And I'm excited to host this wonderful panel today. So let me start with introductions. Cheryl Head, her pronouns are she, her, writes the Charlie Mack Motown Mystery Series. Cheryl believes Black lives matter, and that's why her protagonist is Black, bisexual, and a Black bisexual private investigator. Cheryl is also the Director of Inclusion for GCLS. Karen Callmaker has written a lot of lesbian romance over the 3 decades and seen a lot of change. What hasn't changed is her belief that women are the heroes of their lives. Love is the universal story, and that her next book will never be as good as the last one, and who wants to read it anyway? Her pronouns are she, her. Kinsey McGregor is a proud product of the Xena Warrior Princess fan fiction era. Her books mix romance, intrigue, and adventure with an eye towards strong women you'd want to have as friends. Kimberly Cooper Griffin is an award-winning writer of 6 contemporary romance books who still struggles with imposter syndrome and a little bit of fangirl nerves, especially when in the presence of literary greatness, kind of like now. Jessie Chandler is the author of the Shay O'Halloran Caper series and a couple of other firsts in series. She loves to make people laugh, but occasionally dips her toes into tales more serious. Her pronouns are she, her. And let's start our questions today with you're writing, you're making great progress. What are some things that kill your momentum, and how do you recover? Who's game for first?
Real life. Real life can take you down big time, very fast. It doesn't even have to be COVID. It can just be life. And Ellen Hart always told me that you need to try to get your butt in the seat every day for a little while so you stay in your story, and I think she's right. When you skip a few days or a few days become longer than that, it is really hard to get back in. There's no doubt about that for me.
Cheryl?
Well, I got to say, coronavirus really knocked me for a loop. I couldn't read or write for about 2.5 weeks. All I did was take my temperature and worry about every ache and pain I got. but it also made me a better observer. Once I settled down, I realized I was observing the world differently, and that I kind of thought that maybe this coronavirus world kind of caught up with introverts and how we are anywhere. Things were quieter and stiller. And once I wasn't afraid that I was going to die, I think it made me a better observer of things.
Ah, okay.
Well, I'll echo what everyone said so far about all the external things, but I find more and more that the momentum killers are actually inside my work. They are not so much what Karen describes about that wall you hit where you know that everything is horrible and nobody's going to read it, and so why do you keep working on it? It's more of there's really something wrong with this, and I zigged where I should have zagged, and now I have to go back and find that spot. And
Okay.
and then when you look at that vast amount of stuff you've written since you made that mistake, you have this wrenching feeling of, oh no, I'm going to have to throw all that away. I've spent a month working on that, and I'm not going to use any of it. So that's, for me, that's a momentum killer in my process.
And do you just throw it away? Do you like?
Oh, I have every word I've ever written somewhere.
Okay.
It's in a keep forever file, but most of those end up just buried back in the back of the computer somewhere.
Okay. Kim?
All of this stuff just totally resonates with me. I think I get hit by them all. One of the things, and I'm going to make a shameless plug for the Writing Academy, they actually talked about this, ways to get through it and sitting down and building routines to get to it. But generally, the things that'll stop me are in my head. It's like, I'm not into it anymore. If you get halfway through a manuscript, you're just bored with it, or there's a character that's not resonating. And within the Writing Academy, they told us how to layer things so that we could peel it back and figure out where it's not working. If it's a different, scene that you need to move it to, or you just need to slash someone out of there or something. They give you a lot of hints and tools to work with. So it's usually inside of me. Like most people, I had a hard time at the beginning of the pandemic. It kind of stifled my creativity just because I was too worried about so many other things. And after a while, it actually initiated my creativity, so I was able to write a little bit more, but in a different way. So each time I hit a wall, I think I learned something new and move beyond that.
KK?
My turn. Yes, and to what everybody has said, the pandemic really threw me for a hard loop. So I'm just going to add another thing to further the discussion, just that aging has had a huge impact on my momentum as well, because it's harder to have momentum because every time I come to write, I have to allow time to catch up more. I used to be able to carry around a 60,000 word book in my head, and I never had to write notes. I would go to work and do things and come back and start writing almost where I left off, as if I never stopped. And those days are long gone. And so I've had to give myself permission to use tools to remember things, to not see that as somehow a defeat or a loss, to make myself leave notes. My manuscripts are now littered with comments to myself. Remember why this was important. Remember to bookmark this at the end of the novel. I've got flags, and I use color coding and all sorts of things to bring myself back to where I need to be to move momentum. But it's just harder to get up to speed, and it's harder to feel like I have momentum the older I get. So I'm using lots of tricks and little things to move myself along.
I have another thing to add to that too, and I identify anyways, physical pain. Physical pain is a really hard thing when you can't sit for a long period of time or stand for a long period of time to concentrate, because it's detracting and you can't think as well. So that's, I think, a problem as well in some cases.
Yeah, I definitely echo that.
Me too.
Sitting is probably the worst thing that I do, and I mean, even sitting here now, I'm in pain. Concentrating on all of you and listening to all of you helps a little bit because my brain gets busy.
Mhm.
But it's a whole different exercise when I'm looking at a blank page or I'm trying to write the next paragraph. My brain is very different when it's not distracted. When I have to create something inside my head, I really have to wrestle with the pain to get the words out and onto the page.
We do have a question, and Karen, since you mentioned, what are you using, what software, what tools in your writing to be able to add comments and notes and flags?
I'm using Scrivener because it allows you to do all sorts of things with the manuscript that don't persist. So that when you output it to Word or whatever publisher requires, that all goes away. And so you can't accidentally output things. So that's very helpful. And it also builds in color coding scenes and using color coding to help you sort between things. So just one quick example is that I can read one point of view all the way through by hiding the other point of view. And check my tone, continuity, the voice between scenes, et cetera, et cetera. So Scrivener.
Is anyone else?
Just for Karen, how long did it take you to master that?
Oh, I haven't mastered it. I cherry picked the things that seemed most useful, and they have great tutorials. If you're a Windows user, they're supposed to have a new version soon. One can only hope.
Yeah, Scrivener's hard, but there are sections of it I really do like, but it's a learning curve.
Mm-hmm. It is.
I use a digital recorder. I keep it close by so that when my ideas pop forth, I don't forget them, because I really only have about 3 or 4 seconds to capture them, and they're gone if I don't. So.
Do you have something at your bedside table?
Yes, absolutely. And what's interesting is I find, and I bet I'm not the only one, I find that a lot of things that I think of right before I go to sleep that are like the best ideas aren't really that good the next day.
But you've recorded it, so you know.
I have
Didn't lose it and say, oh my God, that best idea ever is gone.
Right.
Okay, so I'd like to do 3 lightning round questions. So let's see, we'll start off, since we've already been talking about, has COVID-19 shelter in place been a help or a hindrance to your writing?
Been a help for me.
I'd say both. I shelter in place naturally. But the distraction factor is sometimes a real tailspin if something dramatic happens.
It's been a help for me. Like I said, I'm observing things differently, paying attention to human interactions differently. So a help.
For me, it's been both. Just having the extra time, because I'm not socializing, I'm not going places, not a lot of appointments and stuff like that. So the extra time has been wonderful. But there's been a little bit of, the inspiration thing. I work off of the energy of people, and I'm not having a whole lot of that. My family's here, wonderful, wonderful people, but it's the same energy every day. So I would really love to get some more energy in my life again.
On my end, it's been a hindrance. I tend to write in coffee shops. Well, there aren't any coffee shops to be writing in. And it's really hard to write at home with 3 dogs, 3 cats, and 3 other people. So that's been a challenge. But things are loosening up a little bit around here. So I think I found a place where I can be by myself but out. And I'm looking forward to that for sure. But I think the enormity of the whole COVID situation is just one that it can fill your brain up, and you can't get out of that. So that's been a challenge too.
So that leads into, what kind of self-care do you do to keep yourself motivated?
I do a lot of writing dates. That's what I'm doing right now. It's wonderful with Zoom, being able to get online with people. They're way more willing to do it. Before, I would ask people to do that so I could write with people that were further away, and they were too intimidated by the technology. Now everybody's getting into the technology. That's been a pretty cool thing.
Yeah,
I'll go and visit some of my favorite museum sites and look at art for a little bit. I really miss that. That's one of the things I really miss is art that other people do and getting to enjoy it, like theater and movies and things like that. So that's just one of those, and it doesn't take long for me to feel, inspired.
and I'll echo what Kimberly said. I do writing dates. That really does help to have an appointment to meet someone to write. Also, because I'm getting old, the clock is ticking, so the tick, 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 tick is an inspiration for me to write constantly.
I see somebody asking what a writing date is. A writing date is when you literally just get together with somebody and write with them, and they can take the form of anything. Some of my writing dates are in person, and we just sit down, heads down, and write. Other ones, we review each other's work. Other ones, I plan to do half an hour of getting caught up with the people because I'm social. And then we sit down and we just type, and you can hear each other click, clack, ding. Every once in a while, somebody might say, hey, can you help me with something? Or I was thinking about doing this thing. Other people want it to be utterly silent. But it's just being in the presence of other people who are also writing.
One of the things I've been doing is literal art, painting and a lot of mixed media stuff that you don't really have to think a lot about, but you can just do a lot of expression that comes out of you without having to use the brain that does the writing. And I think that's been a big help too.
So is writing, having a writing deadline a friend or foe? Deadline.
What was your question again?
Just giggles.
It's a frenemy to me. I mean, I'll work really hard when I have a deadline, but I hate it.
I'm with you on that, Kimberly. I've always worked best with a deadline until the last book that took 3 years. So I don't know anymore.
I'm really horrible at meeting deadlines, but not having one absolutely doesn't work either. And no one will believe it when I say that I was totally on track for my work in progress, and then the pandemic hit, and now it's been pushed back 6 months.
I come out of television, so I really respect the deadline. You have to get a show on the air at the top of the hour, you do. So I love deadlines.
KG.
Well, I came out of the kind of business community, and my clients had deadlines, and I met them or I didn't get paid. So I found them very motivating. But in writing, I have pushed through to meet deadlines because I do hate the thought of the staff that's waiting on me to get my work done, having to readjust their schedule because I screwed up. Right now, I'm working on a book. I have not promised it. It's not under contract. Nobody knows when it's going to, I don't even know when it's going to be finished. So this is a whole different experience for me. This is the first one that I've worked on without a deadline. And the last one was the first one that I delivered late. So, after delivering one late, I just wouldn't pledge to a deadline again.
So our next question kind of dovetails into a question that a viewer is asking. Some books are anchored in specific times under specific circumstances. When those circumstances change, the book becomes dated. Ever had circumstances change in the midst of a work in progress?
Oh yeah, I'll take that one.
Okay.
When I wrote Aftershock, which was the second book in the Shaken series,
Right.
that went to press with, or it went to formatting with a commitment ceremony at the end. And my couple, Anna and Lily, live in California. Well, right there at the end, Gavin Newsom started marrying people.
Yes, yes, I remember that. Yeah.
So, so I asked Linda Hill, please, can I have this book back? Please, please. And I got it back. I rewrote it as a wedding. And by the time the book came out, Prop 8 had pushed through and you couldn't marry in California anymore. So that wedding on the beach that they had it didn't really hold up until what, 2013, 2014.
Yeah.
And now your book's not dated because you,
Not dated
you know,
now.
you wrote on the right side of history.
It's just the texting that they weren't doing. That's all. That's the only thing that's dated now.
My story about that is that it is Hurricane Katrina. I had about 30% of a book written when Katrina hit, and my settings just disappeared. They were under 9 feet of water. And I had no idea what the world would look like when the water receded. And that was about when the book would be out. So it felt like if I proceeded, I ran that risk of writing stuff I'd just have to throw away. So I set the project aside, and next deadline came along, and I focused on the next work. And 15 years later, I haven't gone back to that story.
Right.
And though I want to.
I was going to say, that's the third book in a trilogy, if I recall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
My wife's waiting for that book, Karen. Just let me.
We're all waiting for that book.
No pressure.
I have a story. I actually have a story. I was writing a book that was in the near future and around the last election, and it was before somebody who will remain nameless right now threw his hat into the ring. And there was a character in this, a governor of New York, who was a lot like this person. I had to trash the book. I couldn't go back to it. I'd written probably 3/4 of it. And it was a pivotal character. I thought it was hilarious because there's no way this could have happened. And then bam. So yeah, it was too close. So I got rid of it.
Could you write a sequel where that person goes away somehow? So prescient.
See, Carol, I'll do it. I'll write the sequel and leave the other one. You guys can just use your imagination for the one I never publish.
Oh, won't take much.
Yeah. No. So related, and this is, I think what one of the viewers is getting to is, how soon will you be incorporating COVID into your writing? When will that start to be something you?
I had to do it right away because the project I was working on, half the plot line doesn't work with the pandemic either going on or having existed. It just, the things that I was reaching for both humor and to gently satirize don't exist. And so I've basically stripped the book in two. And so I'm aware that as I create a new character and put the book in a new place, that I have to reflect certain things about what the pandemic has, I think, put into the past, and probably that's good. And so I don't want it to be dated the moment it comes out because things don't exist anymore. It's not so much the way of life, it's that I think we've also seen a fundamental change in our values, and hopefully more people willing to work together to create systemic change. And I think we talk about all sorts of things differently than we did even 4 months ago. So I want those to be reflected in the work. So yes, there are the difficulties of face masks and not meeting people for dates in person. Those feel kind of mechanical and technical, but there's this fundamental social change that I want to reflect in the work too. So I already started.
For the next Charlie Mack, I'm writing about hate groups, and I was very much inspired and informed by those gentlemen that I saw at the state capitol in Lansing with their guns. And I thought they didn't become this way overnight. So I'm how do people get there? So that's informing that.
I don't envy the research you have to do for that book. I really don't envy you at all. That's got to be very, very heavy.
Yeah, but you know, I found that anger is a really good emotion for me for writing. So Black Lives Matter, for instance, is brought out of a closet and out of a drawer, an old story I had that I didn't feel inspired to write, but I do now, because I do want to, think I said this to the group earlier, I am enjoying killing white men right now in all kinds of gentle ways in my crime books, but I wouldn't do it in person, but in my crime books, they can die.
Therapy. It's therapy.
I've in some ways I'm lucky because I started writing my main series back in, well, it started off 2011 when the first book came out, but I've gone about 3 months ahead for each book. So I'm not up to present day. And in the new book that just came out, it also isn't quite up to present day either. They were talking a little bit about if Hillary was going to win or Trump, and that was before, the election finished. So I don't, at some point my writing will reflect COVID, but it's just hard. I don't envy you, Karen.
Yeah, I don't either. My current work in progress is book 5 in the Shaken series. And I had said it, I'd gotten a story idea that was really a hot topic last year. And of course, COVID has drowned everything else out. But when I started to write it, I was anchoring it in 2019, and I set it with their son Andy, who's now 16 years old, a junior in high school. And I went back and wrote a line in the early part of the book where Andy is proud that he's gotten his class ring, the class of 2020. And I think that that will resonate with a lot of people to set that in time immediately, because the reader's going to look at that and say, oh, wow, kid, you have no idea what's coming in 2020.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So how do you know when the problem is external, outside events and stressors, versus internal, there's something wrong with this book?
I'll start that one. So Cheryl, you know how KG or somebody, maybe it was Karen, said that, the research you're doing is really heavy, but it brings out the anger, which is good, which inspires you to write. And I initially thought my problem with my book that came out, Quest for Redemption, I thought it was all external. We had moved to a different town, we have a different house, we have a different situation. Nothing is routinely the same as it used to be. So I blamed everything on that. And by the time I got done with the book, I realized that a lot of the content of the last half of the book is really heavy. It involves PTSD and alcoholism and depression and suicide. And I have depression myself. And I think in some ways that alone was a block to some of that stuff. And it made it really hard. But I didn't get that until I was done with the book. But I can see now that that really did have an impact.
Karen?
Well, it's obvious when it's an external force. I tend to recognize that right away. But when it's an internal problem with the book, like I made a mistake early on, or I'm losing enthusiasm because there's something inherently wrong with the story, that just takes practice. You have to make mistakes to recognize that you made a mistake. So it's gotten a little easier over the mini manuscripts to recognize when I've gone off the rail inside the book, and even leading to the ability to say, this story's just not going to work, or the effort it's going to take to make it work is going to really hurt. And I don't like to do that in my writing. I like to have, enthusiasm for it rather than dreading it. So it just takes practice. You got to make mistakes and then learn from them.
I think, yeah, that's a good way to put it. I thought of it as, I can tell when it's external because I want to keep writing. But when it's internal, I don't want to write. I realize that the things that I'm doing to distract myself are because I don't want to be spending time with that book.
Right.
Mm.
I had a 10-year period on a book that I was writing, and I actually published it last year. And I didn't know if it was external or internal. It would go back and forth. I think it was just a crap book. The story was stupid. It wasn't going to resonate with people. There's too much going on with it. You know, it didn't meet a certain genre. It was just everything was coming across. And then I realized what it was is I don't know why I did it, but I started the book off with a scene that I won't even read. It was the aftermath of a rape, and that was awful. And I couldn't deal with it. I just couldn't deal with it. So I took it out and rewrote the book, and I was finally able to publish it. And I had enthusiasm for it again. But it was that beginning of that book. It set the tone for me, and I couldn't stand it. And it was an internal thing. But I couldn't, I kept on blaming it on everything else until I realized what it was.
So let me ask you, did if you took the scene out, did the event still happen?
No, I changed the entire
part of the character that you created then?
Yeah. I had to change the whole thing up, that it was something that was not as brutal as that. I just couldn't do it.
Daryl?
Well, my only example is I'm writing a standalone mystery book outside of the Charlie Mack series, as it's set in DC where I live. And it started strong. I liked what I was writing, and then I just hit a brick wall, and I didn't know why. And I walked around a long time just not knowing why, and I just stopped writing it. But then I was able to reframe it with the help of one of my beta readers, because I realized I don't like DC or love DC the way I love Detroit. So I allowed myself to make DC an antagonist rather than a protagonist, and then that just opened the floodgates for me. So sometimes for me, sometimes it's just walking around with the problem and talking to other people about it to help me reframe it.
So someone asks, do you work on more than one project at a time? Do you have more than one book going?
Yeah, I can. I have so many going at a time. There's always one in progress, one in editing, and one that you're doing it right. But I've got a folder of probably 20 different books that I've started, and I don't consider those working at the same time. But there's always, hopefully you're doing your flow through it so that you've got your work in progress ready to go into the editing after you're done. If you want to do that, that's my plan.
That's a big no from me.
Yeah. Me too. I'd like to do that, but I'm too linear.
I have a lot of projects in progress, but only one that I'm working on. I mean, the others I've just put away for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm working on about 4 things right now, just because that clock I said was ticking, is still ticking. So, but I mix it up by working on short stories, the standalone novel, the next Charlie Mack, and I'm doing one other piece. It keeps me, it entertains me.
Okay. So can you describe a time when you were having a hard time finding motivation, and what did you do to get through that?
For me, guilt works really well. KG mentioned, all of the
A cousin to deadline? What?
yeah, all the behind the scenes stuff that has to go on when a book is finished, and they have to prep for it way ahead of time. So after you've pushed things back 2 or 3 or 4 times, you've really upset the apple cart, as it were. And for me anyway, that is one of the big reasons I kept at it. There were times I was ready to just hang that sucker up and call it good. But you know, money been put into a cover, and all of the machinations that had restarted a number of times, you know, so that worked really well for me.
I think for me, this is writing is a job, and you have to go to work. So, so I mentioned, you know, I had a family thing last year that that really upset me. It threw me off, and I had a book due, and I interrupted my work on that, and I felt really bad for setting that book back and missing the deadline. But I wasn't going to miss it by a whole lot. I wanted the fruits of all the work people had already done to come to fruition. So I had to sit down and force myself to work. And I don't think there's no magic to it. You just have to sit down and do the work.
I agree. If you don't get your butt in the chair in front of a computer or whatever you write on, you're not going to, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's easy to put it off. I think the thing, I brought it up earlier, the writing dates really help me. They give me accountability. So if I have a regular writing date with somebody and I get with them on one day, and then a week later I get with them and I haven't made any progress, it makes me feel bad. So I'll try to work on it at least and actually schedule more writing dates just so I can get through it. Guilt does work. You know, if you have a deadline, I've pitched books to my I pitched my last book to my publisher just to get me to finish the book. I generally finish a book before I pitch it because I don't know whether or not it's going to be good. And but I didn't on that one. I was halfway through it, couldn't find the motivation to keep on going, so I pitched it because I liked the story. And then once they accepted it and I signed a contract, I had to get my butt in the chair, and that helped a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I was thinking about the title for this panel, the persistence and perseverance, and then that, you know, that's about the motivation question. And I think, and I wonder what the rest of you think about this. For me, the motivation is filling a void where our stories are not told with the kind of breadth they need to be told, and the frequency they need to be told, and to have the reach they need to have. So I feel like my voice is necessary, so I can't, you know, I can't afford not to sit my ass butt in the chair and get the work done, because I think it's necessary. I think our work is necessary, and in some cases, in some of your cases, Karen Gallmaker, you know, life-saving work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you. I have to remind myself that my voice is important. We alluded earlier, several of us, to the, you know, those demons that come and tell you that you've lost, you have nothing to say, that nobody's going to be interested, you're writing for the wrong market, you don't understand your genre, all these voices that just create this wellspring of negativity, and they're so opportunistic. You know, a pandemic hits and those voices get louder, and I have to tell myself they're just assholes. And that they deserve to go in the trebuchet and, you know, away with you. So I tell myself that. I go back and I read things that I've written before and remind myself that those voices were there when I wrote that, and that seems okay. And so why wouldn't it be okay now that what I'm doing now isn't just as worthwhile as what I did in the past? But my biggest trick is I liken it to holding my breath underwater, which I don't like to do, but which is just write without stopping, without fixing, without doing anything. You just write and write and write and see how long you can do it. Sometimes it's, you know, 2 minutes before something breaks and you can't do it anymore. But other times it'll be 15 or 20 minutes. And it may be something that needs a huge amount of editing, not to mention spell checking, but it can sometimes just make the assholes go away.
NaNoWriMo's been good for that too.
Yes.
For those, I've participated in that a couple of times, and sure, I spent, you know, 4 months editing what I wrote, but I wrote every day, and got my word count, and put out a couple of books that I was really happy with.
Yeah, keeping track of word count helps for me. It does work for me.
That helps for me too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at one of the Q&As and somebody asked, "Do you have any word goals?" And I go back and forth on it. Depends on what book I'm in or where I'm at in the process and stuff. But word counts are fun for me. I like to at least meet them, and then I can reward myself when I exceed them. But then the opposite of it is if you don't meet it, you kind of can get into this like self-doubt thing about I suck again and that kind of thing. So word counts can kind of go positive or negative for you, but I generally they're a good thing for me.
One of the things, so NaNoWriMo KJ2 was a big thing for me. That's how I started writing altogether. And one of the books that they had recommended you check out was something called Writing Down the Bones. And I don't remember who wrote it, but the concept was, you know, you just get something on the page. You've got bones that you can flesh out. And so when I am in that position of I'm shit, I can't do this, if you can just get those bones out, you can always play with them. And so I always in the back of my head, I think just get down the bones and try to, you know, shut up that inner critic who can be really critical.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think one thing about the NaNoWriMo way of doing things is that they encourage you not to edit or to go back and look at the stuff or whatever, just write. And that's an exercise that can help you quite a bit. I don't write in a linear fashion. I'm bouncing all over my works all the time, but NaNoWriMo sits you down and you just go. And that was a good experience for me as well.
So let's see, two things. Several people have chimed in to tell us that Natalie Goldberg wrote Writing Down the Bones.
Thank you.
We had someone who asked, and Kim started to speak to this a little bit, do you write the book and then have the contract, then sell it? Or do you pitch the idea and get a contract and write to that? Which do you do? Book first, contract, have to write it.
Oh, with Bella Books, I tend to, if I tell them I have a book coming, then that's a commitment from me. And I don't tell them what it's about. I give them a title that I may or may not have settled on, and I get a contract for it. And then they tell me when they want it, and I do my best.
Well, I've only worked with one publisher, that's Bywater Books, but I self-published my first novel, which was not a mystery. I wrote it, it took a long, long time. I self-published because I didn't want to go through the agent process because I wanted to be done with it. But Salem West read it, and that's how I got that first contract. She came to me and asked if I would write something in the mystery genre. So I think you can do it both ways. I think I think agents and mainstream publishers prefer you to write something and then pitch it, but I think you can do it both ways. For instance, now for the Charlie Mack, Salem says, I'm putting your book in the 2021 catalog. I need a synopsis and a title. So that's how I do it now.
Karen, you were going to say something.
Well, it's just, I use the informing my publisher that I have a story that I'm happy about. I use that moment as my first opportunity to write down what it is I think the book is about and what I think the book will the audience of the book and its general outline and the names of the characters. I have to be that far along in my thought process before I'll say I have a book. So I do some prep and then I tell my publisher I have a book, and then I get a contract, and it's got a deadline in it that I don't really.
It's still there, even though you can't see the name.
It's still there. It's still there.
Well, what was the old cartoon? I love the sound of deadlines. Make as they wish by. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, the problem is I make bargains with myself, but I know that guy is a complete enabler and can be bought off with M&Ms. So.
So someone asks, how do you work on specific voices for your characters? They feel like it's sometimes difficult to make them sound different from one another. What do you do to make them different? Do you have problems with that?
Well, my technique is everybody has a profile, a pretty deep profile, a backgrounder that I am constantly adding to, and I want them to have distinct voices. Sometimes when things are really, really good, the voices will come to you. The characters will tell you what they want to say. Those are the best days in the world. And then you're just typing and you're just typing along, listening to the voice. Those are the best times.
I'm the same way. I start with a deep character profile, but once I start writing, the voices actually kind of come together as they're going through what they do. So if you've written down a bunch of attributes of someone and then they start going through the motions, it can totally change the voice that you actually had in your head. So yeah, the characters sometimes write themselves. They'll just pour out of you. Other times I've had, I'll go through something and realize something's just a cardboard cutout, and maybe that character shouldn't even exist anymore because there's really no juice to it, right? So.
Yeah, my characters talk to me, and when they stop talking to me, I either have a problem in the book or I haven't differentiated the voice, and I can't tell them from another character. So I listen to the characters' voices in my head. It's weird, I know, but that's how I do it.
I think I used to initially do, Cheryl, what you do, create a really deep profile of these characters. And I thought, oh, this is, well, a NaNoWriMo a spin-off again. And I found that I went too far in describing what I thought was going to happen. And then as the story unfolded, I either had to force what I had planned, for that character, their background into the story, or I just had to not do that. So I've stopped doing the character profiles, which I need to do later on so I can keep track of what's the person is all about. But the names are big for me, and then I can kind of spin off a good voice from the name, like Taffy Abernathy. You kind of can imagine that. Thanks to Lori Lake, that one was.
Let's see. I'm checking our questions. Someone is asking if you have sort of any special ritual kind of thing, setting, pen, paper, what's the software, time of day, what works best in your going to your job of writing.
A nice big. Go ahead.
I like my space. I like to be in my space, and I have a set 5 or 6 hours a day that I'm there. And when I'm not there, I'm not there. I turn it off and I walk away.
I need a nice big empty table at a coffee shop. That's my space.
And I cannot write in a coffee shop because I'm too engrossed in what people are saying. So I can't do that. But I have a writing shirt. I have a black and white flannel shirt. Doesn't work so good in the summer, but I would still put it on. And when I have that shirt on, I am invincible.
I love that.
I have to start off with a big cup of hot chai or a cup of coffee. And oh, there you go. Yeah, I'm also one of those Zoom drinkers. It's been killing me not to pick up my cup and sip all the time, but that starts me off. And I drink coffee or chai throughout my entire, if it's 20 minutes or 10 hours, I'll be drinking coffee or chai, and that's what keeps me in the space.
I didn't realize until I couldn't leave the house to do it that I think of writing as going into my own bubble and pulling the bubble around me. And if I can get the bubble secure, then I can write. And that includes the right music, the right, being comfortable. But as I get older, it's harder to make that bubble come together and stay together. I like distractions, like at a coffee shop, there's all this babble going on, and the effort of shutting it out gives me focus for what I'm doing. So it's, yeah, that's about it. I just have to make my bubble work. And if the bubble's not right, then I'm not going to get anything done.
I like that compare. That's a great visual. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to share a secret, Karen. This is me fangirling you, okay? A long time ago, before I was writing, Karen agreed to have a coffee date with me. We were exchanging books. She was giving me books and signing them for me. And we sat down in this coffee shop that she did. And in my mind, all I could do was fantasize about Karen sitting down, writing all these wonderful, glorious books in this coffee shop, right? And so initially, when I first started writing, I would go to coffee shops and I would pull it on and remember my Karen memory and get going, thinking if she could inspire me that way, I think I could do this. So
that's a great bubble.
yeah.
So someone asked, are there authors that you go to for this is the kind of caliber of writing that I want? Karen mentioned doing online museums and that other art is part of your inspiration. So are there authors that you go to in the in-between time or while you're writing or?
Well, I'm reading broadly in less fic, I think, but last year I think I only maybe read one or two romances because I was trying to read everybody's mysteries. You know, there are lots of them, Jesse Chandler and other people. So I do tend to read. I can't read other people's works when I'm writing.
Okay.
In between projects, I do that, and then my go-to kind of brain teaser and loosening up exercise is to read poetry.
Huh.
Oh.
Okay.
I go to different authors. It depends on the scene I'm working on or whatever, or the kind of book I'm writing. I tend to start reading books like the book I'm and other authors don't do this because they don't want to accidentally pull other people's work into their work and stuff. But I'll read books in the kind of the general idea of what I want to write in that story, just to get, you know, ideas and inspiration. But then I have to be very careful that I don't plagiarize something, you know, or make it a cookie cutter kind of thing. I want the inspiration, not the guide on that.
Well, sometimes I find that when I'm writing a plot-driven book that I have overlooked character chemistry, and it helps me to stop and just go pick up something from Jerry Hill and read, you know, a couple of chapters even, and note the things that I mean, she writes just such wonderful chemistry that you can see the tricks that she's employing to put that on the page and to make those characters so real and so feeling without being gratuitous at all. And you notice the things that give them chemistry. She'll describe a look or a touch or a reaction to something they said that you go, that's chemistry. And so, yeah, I copy it and then I go and put it in my book.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, KG, because I just read Catherine Forrest's Curious Wine again for the GCLS book club, and I felt so humbled when I was reading the love scene. I was thinking, oh shit, my love scenes really suck compared to that.
Right?
Right,
Piles,
right.
piles in the bed, right.
Ticking of the heater.
Yeah. Yeah, I read mysteries. I can't write mysteries, and mystery writers have to be clever, and they have to give you red herrings. They have to keep secrets from you. They employ a really huge part of the toolbox, and so I read mysteries because I find them just inspiring about craft.
Are there particular authors?
Other than Cheryl Head and Jesse Chandler?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well played, Karen.
I'll take that.
You know, Catherine Forrest and Ellen Hart, of course. I wait for Ellen's book every year. I'm just right there at the front of the line. And in the straight world, I really like Lori R. King. I think she does great women and great people and really intricate character studies.
For me, it's J.M. Redmond, and
Oh, of
he's
course.
mystery. And I can't read any books while I'm writing. So I exactly because Kimberly, the same thing, I'll suck something in and it won't be mine.
Right.
But she fired up she fueled my fire for characters and relationships and the protagonists becoming your friends. And that's what drove me to write. So that's a good one to go back to for me.
Can I ask a question of the group, MJ?
Yes, please.
How much inspiration is your editor to keeping you on track and keeping you motivated and inspired?
I'll say that.
I'll start off by saying my editor really, I tend to write pretty dryly. I don't think about the romance elements of the mystery very much, and she will often say to me, "Well, what is Charlie feeling here?" And I'm going like, "What?"
Feeling? What do you mean? Action, action.
Who cares? Yeah.
My editor has really helped me inspire me in several places. I'll drop her name, Barbara Enright. She's just amazing. She catches little things that could be just a huge change. I mean, it's a subtle change, but you know, it just changes the whole thing. And it's not a lot. It doesn't take a lot. It's just a little here and there. And then if there's it's always a suggestion, never an edict. I think that my writing has gotten so much better just from some of the suggestions she's made to me during the editing process. I mean, getting me to write something, she doesn't play into that because I write until I'm ready to submit it, and then the editing happens. But my editor's awesome.
KG?
Well, I've been working with Catherine Forrest for a number of years, and one of the things I really appreciate about Catherine is her big picture look, and it's a technical look. She will tell me why I struggled with a book. She just has that intuition when she looks at a manuscript. She will find the biggest problem with that book, and it will illuminate, well, of course it's there. Of course it is. Why didn't I see that? That's why I've been working so hard, because that piece is wrong. And often it's in the very first chapter. It's, you let all the air out of this book in the very first chapter, and you had nowhere to go with it. And so you throw that chapter away and build up through the whole book, and then you've got photographs of Claudia. Not, let me tell you where we ended up, and then I'm going to get you there. That's what I did with that first pass of that book. And she just, I've told this story before. I wrote her a note and I said, I just had such a hard time with this book. It's just terrible. I just don't feel like this is a very good book. And she wrote me back and said, your instincts are very good. So I think together, she and I got there.
You get the good writers always know when their books are bad, and you're a good writer. Yeah, that's I've had those kind of Catherine notes. And working with good editors, it ends up feeding back into what you do. I don't have an ongoing dialogue with an editor while I'm writing unless I get really, really stumped. But it's invaluable to have an editor come back and offer you insight into what you did versus what you think you did.
I think this whole conversation goes to show how important editors are. Not only for the small things, the overarching things, but even to tell you to get your head out of your rump and keep writing, because you can get down to that point where you're like, I'm done.
And I should give a shout out to my editor, Faye Jacobs. Thanks, Faye.
So I hate to stop this, but it is 1 o'clock. And we've been trying to take at least some questions from the the folks who are watching. And Beth,
Okay.
I think we could go on another hour. I don't know that you want us to.
No, unfortunately, we do have to come to the end. We want to thank our panelists and our moderator, MJ. Thank you so much. Thanks to all of you, the attendees, for joining us. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern, we will start up again with 3 hours of panels. And you can always check the schedule, the entire schedule, at goldencrown.org. And while you're there, you might want to check out the recently posted author readings. So many of your favorite authors are turning in readings as part of our conference, so check those out. We will see you tomorrow, hopefully. Take care, and we'll see
Saturday time with us.
Yes,
Well,
thank
Good to
you.
see everyone
Yes.
virtually.
Yes.
Thank you. I enjoyed it with all of you. You're great.
It's good seeing your faces. I miss you.
Yes.
Bugs.
Yeah, there
Yes.
you go.
Yes.
Hugs.
Yes.
Take care. Wash your paws.
Bye-bye.